Hello, everyone. It's Dan King here with another episode of the Great Mental Health Interview Series. And I am super excited today to be joined by our first investor and just an awesome group practice owner. Her name is Lindsay Smith. And we are going to have a lot of fun today learning about the do's and don'ts of building group practices. How's it going, Lindsay?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure, always, always. So I would love if you could share with the audience of group practice owners. Tell us just a little bit about your background, how you got into the group practice game.
Yeah, so I never actually intended to get into the group practice game. I was working for the county and I just decided, I want to do my own thing. And so I started my own practice and I worked only with teenagers. And in addition to the work I was doing, I loved doing the business building piece of it. So I was out there marketing and meeting people and spreading the word about my practice, and it grew quickly to way more than I could handle. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did all this work to get these people in, these clients in, and I don't want to just say, sorry, can't see you and send them somewhere else. So I was like, maybe I should hire someone. And I'm sure they'll do it just like I do it. And then they can see these clients and the effort won't have been wasted, so to say. So that's kind of how it all started.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, you knew you wanted to work for yourself. You decided you wanted to be your own boss. And then there was no intention of building out a group aspect, but there was just so much demand and you enjoyed, and it came so naturally to you to grow the business that you just decided, all right, there's the demand, I got to hire people.
Exactly. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, I should say, because I'm a therapist, right? So I had no experience managing people, leading people, building a business, like nothing.
Why did you know, or what was it that led to you wanting to be your own boss in the first place?
Well, I will just be quite frank here. So I was working for the county, and at the county, you get paid by the number of years you've worked there, period. Okay. And your education, I think, or whatever position level you're at. Where I was at in the county was the most money that I could make. And I'm a very hard worker. I work really hard. I put my all into everything that I do. And if the person next to you who has the same job as you comes in late every day, doesn't really do anything, they just get paid the same as you. Or if they have more years, then they'll get paid more than you. And it just is, that's just how it is. And because I put so much effort into everything, I was like, I want to see this like coming back to me in some way. And whether it's monetarily or like verbal affirmations or kind of anything. And I just wasn't seeing that at the county. So I loved what I was doing. I loved the teens that I was working with, but I just wasn't seeing any of that. And so that's when I decided to do something on my own.
All right. You wanted a better return on time in every way.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So with no business training, how did you know how to promote your business? Was it just trial and error? Did you have a mentor? How did you figure out what to do?
Yeah. So I did, I think, what I felt like instinctually I should do to start. And then I took classes and I tried to find anything I could get my hands on that would sort of tell me, like, what should I do? And I took classes that were specifically geared towards therapists. I kind of just did everything that I could to find out how to do it. And then I also just used my intuition.
And did you use your intuition on the question of whether to build a cash or insurance-based practice? Because one thing we should tell the audience is your practice is entirely cash-based. How did you make that decision?
It never felt like an option for me. So I don't remember how much I charged when I first started out, but let's say it was $150 for a 50-minute session when I first started. Let's just pretend that was it. And then insurance reimbursement was like $66. And it was more work. So it would have been more work and way lower pay. It just wasn't, I never even considered it.
Okay. Of course, one of the trade-offs that so many clinicians face is this question of, do they want to get good at marketing? Do they want to learn marketing? Because one of the benefits of working on the insurance side is so much of the customer acquisition is done for you. But it sounds like that question didn't really occur to you. You were just like, I'm just not going to make enough money doing this.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of the money and like the extra work. Why would I do extra work to make
Yeah.
less money? Like that just, it was not logical to me. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah, I really don't think I spent a lot of time considering it. I think it was a very short consideration. And then I was like, yeah, no, that's not for me.
Okay. So when it came time then to doing the marketing, to getting the word out, how did you do that?
So I think the biggest thing was around building relationships. So getting to know other people in the community, people who work with well, let me take a step backwards. First of all, I think the most important thing was creating a super specific niche. And because I only worked with teenagers, and in my county at that time, I was the only person who only saw teenagers. There were people who saw teenagers as part of their practice, but no one else only saw teenagers. And so I was so specialized, and they're such a unique breed, our teenagers. And so because that was the only population I worked with, people knew that I specialized in it. And so so then I worked to create relationships with other people in the community who were also working with the teenagers. So therapists at schools and counselors at schools and pediatricians and just anyone else in the community who was working with the same population that I was working with. That's who I sought to create relationships with.
Was there something, so in terms of this niche of teenagers, is there something about you that lends your particular set of skills and talents to working with teenagers?
It was just what I always loved. So right out of grad school, I started working. Well, in grad school, I worked at a high school doing therapy with teenagers. Right out of grad school, I worked with teens in long-term foster care. Then I worked with teens at the at juvenile hall who were in the hall or on probation and who had some kind of drug or alcohol problems. I was working for the Department of Alcohol and Drug Services there. So all of my work was with teenagers. I just love them. I feel very connected to them. I feel like with teens, they're at this beautiful place where they're old enough to like kind of make up their mind about things and make their own decisions. But they're not past the point of being flexible and being malleable. I know some parents might disagree with that in general. And what I found in therapy was that.
Yeah. No, they're at a very exciting time with all kinds of possibilities, but also all kinds of fears, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And was the business person, so the business strategist, maybe you didn't know at the time existed, but that inner business strategist, were you deliberate in thinking, ooh, I'm going to specialize when most are not? Or was it just sort of a happy accident?
No. I was very deliberate in that.
Okay. Nice. Why? I mean, so few therapists actually specialize that way. Why is that?
Because most people feel like, well, if I only take this small amount of people, I'm not going to get as many clients. That's one thing. And I'll explain that in a second. The second thing is they're like, well, I just love working with all these issues. So there's two things I'll say to that. So one, when you pick a specialty, what actually happens is, so let's say you're like, okay, I'm going to work with children with a needle phobia. That is so specific, right?
Yes.
But if you start telling people about it, everyone is going to remember you because no one else is working with elementary school children with a needle phobia. And when you go and introduce yourself to the pediatricians in your area and you say, I specialize in elementary school age kids with a needle phobia, they are going to remember you. And every single time they have a kid come in who needs shots and has a needle phobia, they're sending them to you every single time. Now, contrarily, if you are like, hey, I specialize in anxiety. Right. Cool. So does everyone, and so when you tell that to the pediatrician, they're not going to remember you. When you tell it to anyone, they're not going to remember you. If you have a really engaging personality, they might remember you as a person, but they're not going to think like, oh yeah, I should refer to this person for the needle phobia. They're not going to associate you at all. They're not going to think about that. But if there's something super, super specific, people are going to remember you and refer to you. So it actually helps you to grow your practice faster than anything else. Now, the next thing is you're like, okay, cool. I don't want to just work with kids with a needle phobia for the rest of my life. Okay. Right. Well, a few things on this. So one is when you're saying like, okay, I work with kids with a needle phobia. Well, pretty soon you're going to get known for that. Then what's going to happen is there's going to be an adult with a needle phobia who's like, hey, can you help me too? And you're going to be like, of course. And then there's going to be like I don't know, some other adult or kid, and they're like, they have a phobia of spiders, or they have OCD, or they have something else. And they're going to be like, you're an expert. You're going to be seen as an expert because you are an expert in needle phobia. You're going to be seen as an expert, and people who don't even have that issue are going to want to come see you. So then all these other people are going to start wanting to come see you, and your choice if you want to accept them or stick to just the very specific niche. But there's going to be all these other opportunities. And then lastly, if in a year or two you're like, cool, I'm kind of tapped out on the needle phobia thing, switch your niche. But then you have to go through and kind of remarket yourself. But it's not like you pick one thing and you're stuck with it for the rest of your entire career.
Yeah, and you're right. That fear is extremely strong amongst many, many clinicians, right? They're worried that they're going to be pigeonholed. And the reality is you can change course. If it isn't right for you, if it doesn't feel right, it's going to be in everyone's interest, especially your clients, that you do make a change. So no one's holding a gun to your head, right?
Yep, exactly.
Really interesting. And so I'm picking up in your story, it isn't just that when you're looking for referral partners, they're going to be much more likely to remember the fact that you're a specialist if you are a specialist. But I think there's probably also, and I think you hinted at this, in order for them to refer, it's important that not just they know what you do, but also that you're good at what you do. And there's something about specialization that conveys credibility, not just I'm imagining the way that you brought yourself to the conversations, but I'm imagining that, hey, if you can clearly, concretely state this is what I do, it conveys competence. Is that a fair? Yeah.
100%. You're seen as an expert. When you have a very specific specialization, you're seen as an expert, and then more people want to refer to you and more people want to work with you.
Yeah. I think in any field, it isn't just mental health. You don't just stand out from the crowd, but because so few, well, maybe a better way to put it is so few people specialize, right? That generalists aren't just perceived as not having an easy way to be remembered, but they're also perceived as less competent. There's like a hierarchy in the end, and not everyone can be an expert, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So you've got the specialty. You're the only one seeing teens, and what I love about it is
I'm the only one only
special. Right. Sorry. Yes. Better way to put it. It's such a big niche too, right? It's a great niche in that others aren't focusing on it, but it's a pretty damn big niche too, and one that has a lot of mental health challenges.
And now I will tell you, this was 14 years ago. If I were to do it again today, the landscape is different. So I would absolutely pick something more specific. So I really saw mostly teens with high risk issues. So if I were doing it today, I would say like teens with suicidal ideation. Because just saying teens in today's landscape would not be enough.
Interesting. Okay. So things have progressed enough that there are other Lindsay Smiths now in your area.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. So, all right. So if we go back to this moment where you specialize, you're now getting these referrals naturally. How do you learn how to hire? You have all this demand. It's one thing to just say, I'm going to hire, but how did you do that?
I don't really remember. I will tell you, I don't remember how I hired specifically. I mean, obviously I created a job description, interview questions. I figured out what I was looking for. And really what I was looking for was exact replicas of me, which didn't work out so well. Exactly. And I was like the worst boss at the beginning because I micromanaged every little thing because I literally expected them to do everything exactly like I did it. And obviously it doesn't work like that. So I've learned a lot over the years and grown a lot in that. But it's definitely been a roller coaster. The hiring, the managing, just the people. I would say that's been for sure a challenging aspect and something that's helped me to grow a lot.
Going back to this initial moment in the hiring journey when you wanted people to be like you, why was that, and what was the problem with that expectation?
Well, the reason for it was because what I was doing was working. right? So my clients were getting great results and I was getting a ton of new clients all the time. So I wanted people to be approaching it in the exact same way. Obviously, everyone is their own independent self and does things that are unique to them. So over time, I learned that, you know, they wouldn't do it exactly like I did it, but their way could be even better for their people, you know? And so then I learned to look for, in terms of the hiring, then I learned to look for like more of the essence. Like, yes, absolutely the clinical skills, but are they good at connecting? Are they good at making me feel comfortable in the interview? You know, like, did I feel like this would be a warm person to talk to? And like, did I feel like my clients would enjoy talking to them? You know, so I kind of looked for that. I forget the other part of your question.
I forget it too. That's okay. So in those days, was there a labor shortage of clinicians in your area? Was it easy to find people?
At the beginning, I feel like maybe it was, I feel like I've noticed the challenge in finding great clinicians to bring onto the team for about the last 8 years.
Okay.
So it's not a new thing. And I'm very picky because I want people who are going to be incredible with their clients.
Yes.
Because we always want the clients to have the very, very best experience. Now, I will say, while we embrace each person's uniqueness and what they're going to bring to the table, we do still have very specific things laid out as to what they're supposed to do before the session, what they're supposed to do after the session, like not during the session, but the pieces surrounding it that create a really incredible client experience, a really incredible experience for their family, for the intake calls. You know, all of those things are laid out very specifically so that we do get high quality all the time, or as much of the time as possible. It's still all, the organization is all made of humans, right? So we still get human error and things like that regularly. And that's something that I just had to learn to be okay with.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so what are some of the things that make for an incredible client experience? If I'm a clinician, I've got a group practice, it's going okay, but I don't have clients raving about me, right? I don't have clients saying, oh, your clinicians are the best, I'm only going to refer people to your practice. What makes for an incredible client experience?
I will answer that in 1 second and remember it in case I forget the question again. But first I want to say, with the practice, so our group, I think, is about 35 people now, about 25 clinicians, and we don't have it where every single person always has an amazing experience, right? We have negative reviews online because usually it's people where we had to report something that was legally mandated, or we had whatever. What I had to learn to be okay with is that there's always going to be some outliers that are not happy with it. And so I guess I just wanted to say that because that was an important thing for me to learn. It was really hard at first because it was like, felt like a dagger to the heart every time there was an experience like this. And we always try to, to mitigate things as much as we can. And this goes back to the great patient experience. If there is an issue that comes up, to hear them and to really address it. But just in general, for how to create a great client experience, we try to have right from the intake call. So we have a person who's answering the phone, who's warm and empathetic and really listens well and explains the services in a lot of detail. We also put a lot of information on our website so that people aren't surprised about what our prices are when they call in. They're not surprised that we don't take insurance. Although, even though it's on our website, they're still often surprised.
Yes.
But it's all laid out on the website. And then the person who's taking that initial call is going through everything very clearly with them in a very empathetic way. And then they're taking the care to match them with the clinician who they think is really going to be the best for them based on the clinician's experience, as well as logistically what time slot the client wants. Like if they're only available Thursdays at 4, then they have to go with the clinician who's there Thursdays at 4. But if there's a clinician who we think would be way better for them, we'll tell them that and see if there's any flexibility, So right from that very first moment. And then in terms of the intake, the first day that they come in for their very first appointment, we go through the entire contract with them. And So we actually have a script for the intake session that the therapists have to memorize ahead of time. And they have to pass the script, it's called. So they practice it with other clinicians in the practice, and then they have to get final approval to be able to see their first client. And the reason that we do this is because we want to make sure that they're connecting extremely well in that first session. So it even tells them like when to look at the client, when to, like, let's say they're seeing a teenager, when to look at the teenager, when to look at the parents, exactly how to go over the contract so that everything is really clear for them, so that the client knows exactly what we're going to be reporting and the parents know exactly what we're going to be reporting to CPS or whoever else, depending on the situation. You know, everything is very, very clear. And then it starts to go into asking the client about their, you know, how do you feel about being here? I think is the very first client we ask, the very first question we ask the teen client once the parents leave the room, because that then gives them an opportunity to be like, I don't want to be here. This is stupid. My parents are making me come. And then we can join with them on that and address that right at the beginning.
Yes.
That fester. So there's all of these things that are laid out in this first session to make the first session a really great experience for the client. And then after that, then the therapist is, you know, does what they feel like is going to work best for that particular client. There's check-ins that happen. There's several different measures kind of we have in place, but the biggest thing that's sort of laid out for them is that first session. Other things that help to make it a really great experience is, again, if it's a teen client, we're checking in with the parents regularly to make sure that they understand what's going on to the extent that the teen feels comfortable with, to make sure that they can let us know if they have any concerns, you know, that the back and forth. All of that, I think, helps to create a really great client experience.
So much rich. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, did you want to add?
Yeah, so we use Dr. David Burns. He wrote the Feeling Good book, and he has a form that we use. All of our clients use it every single session. And the first side, the front side of the form is a patient rating scale. And so they're telling us right at the beginning of the session how they feel on several different markers. Then they fill it out again at the end of the session, how they feel on these several different markers. So every single session we can see if they felt better, if they didn't. Then the back side of the form is the therapist rating scale. And so every single session, the client is rating their therapist on empathy, on all of these different markers, including like, what did you like best about the session? What did you like least? So the therapists are getting feedback from the clients every single session, which we have to learn as therapists, like, how do we take this? But then once we've learned that and we can take it, we get to use that information to make every session better than the last.
So much richness to dig into there. That's really interesting. Very beautifully iterative process with a lot of measurement in a type of work that very often isn't measured so much, right?
Exactly.
Really, really interesting.
And it's really cool too, because sometimes, you know, you'll be in a session with a client and maybe you can feel something's off, but you'll like ask them like, hey, what's going on? You know, and they won't really tell you anything. But with this form, because they're just writing it down, they do often say it. And then at the next session, you can be like, hey, so I think I messed up the last session. I did this, and I understand now that wasn't the right way to approach it. That didn't feel good to you. Can we talk about that? And you're able to repair it right away instead of having it, you know, build upon each other and then the client just drops out of therapy.
Really powerful. Yeah, no, you're really onto something there. It is very powerful to write, because there's a way in which when we write something, it's part of the reason journaling can be so therapeutically effective. We're getting thoughts out of our head, and there's a neutrality of paper, right? That doesn't exist if I'm dealing with a human being in the world. I'm speaking to you. I have certain thoughts, experiences, hunches about who you are, right? Much of it subconscious, but you're not neutral. You are you, right? Whereas writing is, there's a certain power it has, in part because the page is neutral.
Exactly.
That's so you frequently see that patients who may have some kind of interpersonal issue, may have some kind of challenge, it's much easier if they feel much freer to describe it on paper than verbally.
Yeah, it's not a perfect system. You still have clients who just don't want to say anything bad about you because they're worried about how it's going to,
Yeah.
like, what's going to happen with that. But then it's the perfect time to practice, right? Because you're a safe
Mm.
space for them to do this. So when I used to have that come up with clients, then I would have them practice in session, like, hey, you got to tell me one thing you didn't like about today's session, and it has to be about me, you know,
Oh,
for
okay.
them to practice it, and then we could practice how it was difficult, and then I could give them the response, and then they could see what it felt like to get that response and to make the changes, so it can be a really restorative, repairing conversation for the client.
Okay. And so does the clinical director review for every session, or maybe, at a certain frequency, review the results from both perspectives?
No, we don't have anything like that in place at this time. We use it on an individual basis primarily right now. We hope to eventually get a system where it can be digitized so we can kind of look at results as part of the greater statistics for the practice, but we don't have that implemented yet.
Got it. Got it. Still super interesting, and definitely not what you see from most group practices. Do you find, do clinicians really appreciate it, or some clinicians resistant to the system?
Some clinicians are resistant to the system.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it depends on their comfort with getting the feedback, but
Mm.
but I think it's really important because it can make us so much better at what we do.
Yes. Yes. To some extent, you're able to screen for that in interviews, I'm assuming. To some extent. Yeah. It's not.
Yeah. We hope that it's a teachable skill, but yeah, it's not something we usually get to get. We try,
Yes.
but it kind of is a situation where it is what it is, and so then we work with what we have.
So I'm curious, as you think about from a leadership perspective, these systems and how they work with clinicians and patients, do you still see any patients yourself? And no, none at all?
None.
Okay. Do you feel in some way out of touch with the patient or even the clinician experience, or do you feel like you're still sufficiently connected to it?
I am out of touch with it because I don't run my practice anymore. So my two therapy practices, I have someone else running. So I just work with her on high level, strategic decisions, and then she manages the entire team on a day-to-day basis. She does all the people work. So she's in touch with those things. I am totally out of touch.
Yeah.
So I just ask her if I need to know something, but I'm absolutely out of touch with it.
It's interesting. So that's a very unusual situation in the industry, right? Very unusual situation. I think it's a hard thing for most group practice owners to conceive of, right? That they could be that far from the day to day. Was that a tricky transition for you, or did it come naturally ultimately?
Well, first, I will just tell you, it's amazing. If you're thinking of this, it's absolutely amazing. Was it a tricky transition? So no, in that the person that I hired to run the practices is phenomenal. I think that's absolutely the most important piece, is getting a great person. And I had known her for a really long time. So we already knew each other's strengths and weaknesses and knew how we would be able to work together. And she's phenomenal at leading people. And actually, she is not even a clinician.
Right.
But she is so good at what she does. And so she's a sponge. I was able to teach her all of the things that I was doing. And we have manuals for every single position, clearly laying out literally everything that the person does. So from the therapist to the clinical director to literally every position, including the executive director. So I had my own manual, and then I trained her on it and iterated over time.
Yeah, standard operating procedures are super, super valuable. There's all this knowledge we have in our heads as the founder, and actually getting that in writing is, again, a very rare thing that we typically don't see in group practices. But another rare thing I'll point out for the audience is that the person you have in place now isn't a clinician. Was that initially a challenge for you, or did you just sort of know, Melissa is so sharp, she's going to pick it up. I'm not worried about that at all.
Well, because I knew her so well and I knew all of her experience and I just knew how amazing she was, it was very easy.
Yeah.
And I did it.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
did originally. So my two centers were originally, I was running one of them as executive director, and I had someone else running the other one as executive director. So I had already trained someone and like gotten that experience. That person was a therapist.
Mm,
So I saw how that worked, but I also understood when I was hiring Melissa, like which parts would be different, and it just worked. It was and is really phenomenal.
mm. Have you made, in stepping away from the day to day, do you think, is there a trade off here of the practice is growing less quickly than it would if you were more engaged, or do you feel that trade off doesn't exist?
Well, I think that's a really challenging question because Melissa took over April 1st of 2020. So
Mm,
right as COVID started.
mm,
So yeah, we had a little bit of stunted growth, but I don't think it was because of Melissa. I think it was because of COVID and just the
yeah,
changes that we had with that.
yes.
So I don't think that that's the case at all.
Got it. Got it. Do you aspire to grow the practice significantly, or are you generally kind of happy with the size it's at?
No, we're still growing. We're absolutely still growing. Yeah. And
Hmm.
starting new things. I mean, as you know, we started a TMS clinic, transcranial magnetic stimulation clinic. Um,
Hmm.
and it's really exciting to be doing something new. And we're really excited specifically about TMS. And so we're excited to grow that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, TMS is something we see from time to time in practices. I'm curious at what point does it make sense to bring in TMS? What was the signal to you guys where you were like, all right, now is the right time? When should, I mean, practice owners think about TMS a lot, but it isn't the right fit for every practice, right? How should practice owners think about TMS?
I don't know. I don't
Hmm.
have the answer to that. We
Hmm.
brought it in because I personally received TMS after a traumatic brain injury that I had been suffering for many, many years. And I went through TMS and it was a phenomenal experience. And so then I was like,
Hmm.
okay, we need to bring this to our clients. Like it's
Hmm.
not an option not to. I have to do this. And so
Hmm.
I don't know for other people how they decide if it's the right time or not.
Yeah.
It is a challenge because it's the machine. At least the machine that we got was very pricey. Bringing in a really experienced psychiatrist, bringing in a full time technician, like all of these things. It's been a lot. But it's been really fun, and we're really excited about the work we get to do with the patients there.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Yeah, there's so many opportunities to grow a group practice, both in size, but also with the different treatments, right, that you can offer patients. So it's a really, really exciting time, and we're in a place where there's so much innovation in mental health. It'd be hard to know which innovations to explore and prioritize.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. So we actually expanded our centers in a lot of different ways before we brought in TMS. So we expanded by bringing in, a nurse practitioner who could prescribe medication. We brought in a testing psychologist who could do all the different kinds of testing needed. And it,
Mm.
it was actually really cool because we knew both of those people before bringing them onto our team. We didn't do like it wasn't like, we are looking for this person, let's do an interview. It was like we knew these two people and then they
Mm.
wanted to come and join our team. And so
Mm.
we decided to create a department sort of like around them.
Got
But
it.
it's
Got
been
it.
cool adding new services and being able to expand what we're offering to our clients.
Makes me think of just the importance of people, right? So, in order to provide the great client service that is so essential to what you want to do, you just need the right people. But in order also to offer these new services to give patients new opportunities, you just need the right talent. So, talent is a huge part of what you built.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, as we come towards the end of our time together, knowing that we both have a hard stop popping up, I'm curious if let's say there's a group practice owner who is at the point where, they've got about 8 or 10 clinicians. We often find these practices, but they're not quite at the point you are where they can really separate themselves from the day to day, right? They're still in it. They're wearing the hat of business owner, clinician, supervisor of other clinicians.
Yep.
What are the most important things for them to know to get from that place to where you are?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just start. So like for example, The first thing that I did, well, early on in the practice, I ended up hiring someone to do all the intake calls. And at first, that person was actually serving as my personal assistant, as well as doing all the intake stuff. And it was a full-time person. So that was kind of the first non-clinical, non-revenue generating employee team member. And it was great to be able to have all of that taken off my plate. And so I've known other practice owners that I've coached actually who have done hired part-time people for this role to start. And that's a great way to do it too. And then the next thing that I did was hire a clinical director. And when I say hire, it was one of my therapists, and I promoted them to be the clinical director. So now they're the ones supervising associate clinicians. They're the ones that other clinicians can go to with questions. And so as we kind of just slowly started creating more positions where people who were already on the team could take these roles. So now, for example, we have the clinical director, but we also have supervisors, and the supervisors report to the clinical director, and then the supervisors can each supervise a few associates. And then we have actually a center director in training. And so she's learning from Melissa how to run the center, so that as we keep growing and Melissa steps into a higher position, then the center director in training can run the center. So kind of expanding in that way. So really find the things that you're not that interested in doing anymore.
Yes.
Either get someone else on your team, promote them to be able to do these things, which, by the way, is amazing for them because they're excited that you're willing to give them these new responsibilities, ideally a little bit of a pay bump. They're really excited that you're giving them this chance, and then you're getting these things off your plate that makes a really big difference for you, not only in how you spend your time, but in having more time.
Yeah. So am I almost picking up that you're buying back your time and the time of others, and there may be a short-term profitability sacrifice involved, but it's so worth it because it allows everyone to be in their zone of genius and to feel respected and honored, right? That they're given a new role in the increasingly growing hierarchy.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool. I love that. I think that's really good strategic advice for folks that we see it so often, right? They're in the sort of 8 to 10-ish clinicians wearing too many hats. Usually they're working 70 hours a week. They're completely overwhelmed, right? Yeah. And so at that point, you may be a bit more profitable, but you're paying for it with exhaustion in so many cases.
Yep. And I will tell you, just so you know what you're getting into, when you make this decision to do this, in the short term, you're going to have to work a little bit more. Yeah. Because you're going to be putting together all this information for this new person, hiring them, training them, or promoting them, training them. But then as soon as they're trained, it's like you get all this time back and it feels phenomenal. And I didn't even see it affect my profit margins very much. I mean, it's so small compared to the time that you get back. And then with your time, you can do things that help the practice bring in more money.
Amazing. And so to wrap us up, I always love to end on a human note. When you're not working in your practice, what do you do for fun? And in your case, there's opportunity to have plenty of fun because you've bought back so much of your time. So what do you do with that time?
I travel a lot. I love traveling. So I like to travel very often. I like to go to conferences. I like to learn things so that I can keep growing personally, professionally, in all the ways. I like to hang out with my family and friends, the kids, drink wine, all kinds of fun things. Go wine tasting. I live in Temecula, California, which is wine country of the South, they say, Southern California. Yes. And so I enjoy the vineyards and things like that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I think group practice owners will find this extremely helpful, both the story of sort of how you came to this place, the lessons you learned along the way, and how they can get to that beautiful place of, business ownership is worth it because you can be free and you can help lots of people and make some good money all at the same time.
Yep, absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Let me stop the recording here. How do I stop the recording? There we go.